On April 8, 2025, White House Press Secretary Karoline Leavitt conducted a press briefing addressing several key topics. Tariffs on Chinese imports. Leavitt announced that President Donald Trump will impose additional tariffs on Chinese imports, bringing the total tariff rate to 100%, effective April 9, 2025. This decision follows a series of escalating tariffs between the U.S. and China. Leavitt emphasized that the U.S. does not rely on other countries as much as they rely on the U.S., stating that President Trump has a spine of steel, and he will not break.
On the other hand, countries like China, who have chosen to retaliate and try to double down on their mistreatment of American workers, are making a mistake. President Trump has a spine of steel, and he will not break, and America will not break under his leadership.
Deportation of U.S. citizens to El Salvador. Addressing reports that President Trump suggested deporting incarcerated U.S. citizens to El Salvador, Leavitt clarified that the president had simply floated the idea and acknowledged uncertainty about its legality. She stated that the administration is exploring legal pathways for such actions and emphasized the president's commitment to transparency.
Over the weekend, President Trump said that he would be willing to have U.S. citizens deported to El Salvador with the cooperation of President Bukele. How would that work legally, and how many people would potentially be available for that operation?
So the president has discussed this idea quite a few times publicly. He's also discussed it privately. You're referring to the president's idea for American citizens to potentially be deported. These would be heinous, violent criminals who have broken our nation's laws repeatedly, and these are violent repeat offenders in American streets. The president has said, if it's legal, right? If there is a legal pathway to do that, he's not sure. We are not sure if there is. It's an idea that he has simply floated and has discussed very publicly as in the effort of transparency. Reagan.
Border security and immigration. Leavitt highlighted a significant decrease in southwest border crossings, reporting a 94% reduction compared to March of the previous year. She attributed this decline to President Trump's leadership, noting that Border Patrol agents are now focused on securing the border rather than processing illegal immigrants. Engagement in international conflicts. Regarding the ongoing conflict involving the Houthis, Leavitt rejected claims from Senators Jeff Merkley and Rand Paul that recent U.S. strikes are unauthorized. She asserted that Iran has been weakened by these operations and emphasized the president's authority to conduct defensive strikes to ensure freedom of navigation in the region. Fentanyl crisis. Leavitt addressed the fentanyl crisis, labeling it a national security issue and noting that it remains the leading cause of death among young Americans. She indicated that the president is focused on combating this epidemic, though specific strategies were not detailed during the briefing. Tariffs and trade negotiations. Reporter Jackie Heinrich from CNN inquired about the timeline for trade negotiations, noting that Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent indicated discussions might extend into June, while National Economic Council Director Kevin Hassett emphasized the need for favorable deals. She asked if President Trump had a specific deadline in mind. Leavitt emphasized the administration's swift approach, stating, "We always move at Trump speed here at the White House, which is incredibly fast." She underscored the president's commitment to securing beneficial deals for American workers and addressing trade deficits involving the entire trade team in the process. Reporter. Another journalist questioned whether the president would consider extending the deadline for implementing tariffs given ongoing negotiations with various countries. Leavitt clarified that while negotiations are underway, the tariffs are set to take effect as scheduled at midnight. She reiterated the president's intent to ensure that any agreements are advantageous to the U.S. Supreme Court decision on deportations. Reporter. A question was raised regarding the Supreme Court's ruling that allows the Trump administration to use the Alien Enemies Act from 1798 to expedite the deportation of alleged gang members. The reporter asked if the administration was disappointed in Justice Amy Coney Barrett's stance given her previous decisions. Leavitt expressed satisfaction with the court's decision, viewing it as a significant victory. She stated, "We believe this was a massive victory. The Supreme Court made that very clear last night." Internal administration dynamics. Reporter inquired about the apparent public disagreements between Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent and National Economic Council Director Kevin Hassett regarding trade policies. Leavitt downplayed the differences, remarking, "Boys will be boys." She highlighted the administration's transparency and the president's openness to diverse viewpoints within his team. Engagement with Venezuela. Reporter sought information on any forthcoming actions toward Venezuela, particularly in light of recent sanctions. Leavitt did not provide specific details. but mentioned that the president had imposed secondary tariffs on the Maduro regime, particularly targeting oil, aiming to exert pressure on Venezuela's leadership. These interactions reflect the administration's positions on pressing issues, including trade policies, immigration enforcement, internal dynamics, and foreign policy.
He is guided by a firm belief that America must be able to produce essential goods for our own people and export them to the rest of the world. President Trump approved emergency declarations for Arkansas, Kentucky, and Tennessee, allowing FEMA to provide federal assistance like equipment and resources to support state and local emergency response officials who are leading this response on the ground. Last night, the Supreme Court delivered a massive legal victory to the Trump administration and allowed us to continue removing foreign terrorist invaders under the Alien Enemies Act. This was a smackdown to a rogue left-wing, low-level district court judge who have relentlessly tried to stop President Trump from using his core constitutional powers as head of the executive branch and as commander-in-chief. The highest court in the land made it clear that the President of the United States has the power to protect our homeland and forcibly remove foreign terrorists who pose a grave threat to families and communities. Thank you to the Supreme Court for upholding the rule of law and protecting the Constitution. Our message to the monster Tren de Aragua and MS-13 terrorists still hiding illegally inside our country is clear. Deport yourself now, or you will be locked up and sent back to your home country. On another matter, the historic Liberation Day announcement last week by President Trump made it very clear that the era of American economic surrender is over. President Trump is no longer going to allow American workers and companies to be ripped off at the hands of foolish trade practices that shipped away millions of high-paying jobs and hollowed out communities across the country. It's America first, all the way. And despite fear-mongering by the media, the world is clearly responding to President Trump's approach. Just yesterday, President Trump held a bilateral meeting with Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu here at the White House. The Prime Minister pledged to immediately eliminate America's trade deficit with Israel and remove their trade barriers. Israel's proactive approach should serve as a model for the rest of the world. Also yesterday, the President spoke with Japan's Prime Minister, who wants to negotiate as well. The President also spoke to the acting President of South Korea this morning. He has tasked Secretary Bessent and U.S. Trade Representative Jamieson Greer to lead these talks. In total, since the Liberation Day announcement, nearly 70 countries have already reached out to the President to begin a negotiation. Countries are falling over themselves to reform their unfair trade practices and free open their markets to our country. Why? Because these countries greatly respect President Trump in the sheer power of the American market. These countries realize they've gotten filthy rich over the past few decades by imposing substantial tariffs on American-made products and ridiculous non-monetary barriers to block out American industry. The jig is up. Past American presidents sat by and let this happen, but President Trump stood up for our country, and he is saying no more.